friends, welcome to episode 192 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
Happy New Year, Rob.
Happy New Year to you, too.
Starting off 2023, are we...
I'm just adjusting things from a distance to make sure we don't have a problem.
Oh, yep. Had a brief little audio hiccup here, so
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what's going on with this, but I apologize if you guys heard some extra music that got tossed in or not at all. So I will make things work by the end of this, I promise.
192 episodes, and every so and then these little technical hiccups still.
I'll take one
heads.
Engineering problem a year. I'm fine with that.
Hey, no, I'm good with it.
Get it out of the way, kind of a thing. So it was a good end of the year. It's a weird, wet, cold beginning of the year.
It's not even cold though. It's like 50. We're having a weird warm spell. It's all across Europe too, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, the Earth is warming up in the wintertime or something, you know?
Yeah, but at some point last year, some senator made a snowball and showed it off in Congress, so he can.
Yeah, because those guys are great at science and things.
That means climate change isn't real. So
yeah. Anyways, we hope everyone is staying safe and dry and warm in this season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your home, your quote unquote home state of ownership got so much snow, though, I heard over Christmas.
Yeah,
like classic amounts of snow.
Yeah, so. Born and raised, well, not really raised, but Buffalo, New York was my place of birth. So
yeah.
Had a lot of family back there, and apparently they got demolished with snow, which is usually not a huge problem for them. It's such a frequent occurrence for them. You'll hear the news reports over in Buffalo local, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're overnight. We're gonna get probably 12 to 18 inches, whatever. No problem. The plows will be out, things will be functional. For by tomorrow."
Yeah.
But man, no, they got super hit. So.
Yeah.
Hearts, thoughts, and minds go out to everybody there in
minds, shovels. But I'm interested to see how quickly it dissipated for them. So, I'm sorry.
Who was ringing?
Somebody's ringing here.
It's not me.
Oh, okay. That might have been the engineer's call coming in to help us out here. So. All right. So that being said, it is the first of the month, and by popular demand, we were told to continue doing educational seminars.
Yeah. So last year, every first Wednesday of the month, we were doing our 101 series, aimed at beginning storytellers. Trying to help with a lot of the sort of growing pains of getting into storytelling. How do you come up with a concept for a game? How do you know what game system to pick? How do you run plots?
Mm-hmm.
How do you invent a big bad evil guy and put that in there? How do you come up with NPCs? How do you world build?
Yeah, if you want to know that stuff, go back and listen to all of last year's 101s every month. If you go to our website, you can actually put into the search Storytelling 101, and it'll bring up a nice long list of all of them.
Yeah. So this year, we decided to kind of bump that up a little bit, and we're going to be doing a 202 series.
Yep.
And so the first Wednesday of every month is going to be one of our 202s, and 202s are going to kind of be designed to either take a subject that we 101'd last year and deep dive it a little more, or go a little deeper into a concept that's maybe a little off the beaten path. Yeah. And I think that's what tonight's show is.
Yeah, when you first brought up the idea for this, it made sense to me, but I was like, do we have a full show out of this? And you had opinions.
Well, I think there's a lot to look at here. The topic we're going to be kind of deep diving into tonight is the idea of liminal spaces. Now, I think in popular culture, liminal, the word liminal space has kind of taken on a meaning of its own. I remember when we first dropped the idea on the Discord, one of our Discord users was like, "You mean like the back rooms?" Mm-hmm. And the back rooms is kind of a community writing project, very much like SCP is.
Yes.
Where it's not really, it's a decentralized writing project.
Right.
And there's a series of videos that people have made and stuff like that, all dedicated to these back rooms, which are supposed to be these weird, almost horror-esque liminal spaces that are outside of reality and very odd and almost spooky, but just kind of off-putting in this sort of way. And that's not what we're going to be talking about tonight. So if you came here seeing the title of this, Liminal Spaces, and thinking we're talking about the back rooms, we are not. I'm sorry to disappoint.
Yes.
However, what we are talking about is what a literal liminal space is.
That in-between space that is either physical, chronological, or social.
Yeah. In a lot of ways. Anything that is technically a transitional period or a transitional something between two other concrete things is liminal in a way. So like a hallway, for instance, is probably your best example of a liminal space. It is a space between two rooms. You can't really have a hallway by itself, because a hallway is defined as a space that connects two rooms. But it doesn't really have a purpose in and of itself other than to connect those two rooms.
Yeah, and if it doesn't have two rooms, it's a room.
Yeah.
It's just an oddly shaped room. Or closet, so.
Exactly. Travel time. Which is going to be very pertinent to our discussion tonight. Travel time is a liminal space. It's a place between two destinations. And if you don't have a place of departure and you don't have a destination, then you're just moving. Travel in and of itself is a liminal space. Transitioning from one job to another. You don't have employment at your last place. You haven't started employment at the new place.
Yeah. Elevator would, I think, Knox, be considered a liminal space. It is in between floors.
Yeah, elevators, vestibules.
Yeah.
I think those are
good transitional areas. Yep.
Yeah,
Totally,
exactly.
Totally.
Exactly. So what does any of this have to do with tabletop RPGs? I mean, it sounds very cool conceptually, but why are we talking about this tonight, and why are we writing an entire 202 about it?
Well, because there are a lot of spaces in between in games. We have a series of adventures. We have a Act 1, an Act 2, or even just a spot between scenes. Whether it is moving from one town to another, whether it's even just moving from a conversation at the pub and getting, what the quest is, and going to the dungeon that you have to go take care of, that is liminal space. It is a transitional space. And understanding how to link those spaces together in a meaningful way is one thing, but also just understanding what you can do in that space and what you don't have to do in that space. And I think that's the thing is people don't, I guess for me, when I first started out, I didn't think liminal space was a thing, and I had to fill every gap.
Yeah.
When I first started out, it was in an adventure, you go room to room to room to room, and everyone explains every minute of every second of every moment that they're out there.
Yeah.
Just like you're not in combat, but still technically doing rounds. That is exhausting as hell.
It really is, and it makes your plots drag all to hell too, because honestly, 90% of what you do in a day is not at all interesting.
No.
And I think, a lot of what our games actually look like, and I think what a lot of storytelling systems have encouraged us to design our games is a set of encounters. I know that Savage Worlds is really big about this. There's a lot of different encounter types that they teach you how to build in just the main Savage Worlds book. And so, what do you do with the spaces where you string those things together? It's essentially jumping from one encounter to the next, to the next, to the next. And, you watch movies, Movies do this all the time, where they just we have to go there. And literally they jump cut, and boom, they're there. Why? Because nobody wants to watch 45 minutes of people just staring at the road.
Yeah.
In 300 meters... turn left.
Exactly. Unless the movie is about the journey, and even then, it's a montage.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to see 6 weeks of training minute by minute. But they'll take, 2 minutes of boxing, 3 minutes of jogging, 5 minutes of them sweating, and then getting better at the jogging and the boxing till eventually they become this glistening fighter.
Yeah.
that's a liminal space that sits between between I am getting ready for a fight and here is the fight.
Yeah, there's your
You know?
8 weeks of training. We showed it. It's done. Let's move on.
Exactly.
Because the fight is what you're really focusing on.
Exactly.
And so, in our games, we have all these liminal spaces. We've got the travel. We've got just downtime.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like the adventuring, the quote unquote adventuring day that D&D, throws out there. Like, if you adventured 7 days a week, you hit level 20. Starting at first level, you're supposed to hit level 20 in like 2 months or something like that.
Right.
It's like Farmer Joe and, episode 1 is like, oh no, a whole zombie, please don't kill me. And then they're like, 2 weeks later, they're like, let's go punch God.
Yeah. They're ripped and knocking out the king's teeth,
And I don't think, I think, you'd even, I'm pretty sure I read like even in the DM's guide, they're like, yeah, it's not really designed to be constant 2 months of 24/7 adventuring,
Right.
Like, take some time, even if it's months, even if it's literally years between adventures, take some time between them. And in that time, you've got downtime. What are you doing during that time, Shopping. Shopping is a pretty common liminal space.
It's the short end of the stick of liminal space and the amount of time that it takes, but
It's
yeah.
arguably the most interactive of the liminal spaces.
Oh, it can be, I would say.
But I dare say most of us don't think of shopping as an encounter.
No, and honestly shouldn't. It can be painful.
Yeah, it's not really a driving part of our stories,
Right.
And then, rests. Rests are probably the most common. I mean, like, especially, Dungeons and Dragons, our most common flagship property here, have long and short rests built into their things, where literally the characters are sitting around doing nothing. Cooling their heels,
Yep.
But, even outside of Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, everybody's got to stop for the night. Or
Yeah.
day or whatever, everybody's got to rest at some point. And when you're just kind of sitting around the campfire or sitting around the, Club Penumbra at the end of the Shadowrun or sitting around the spaceport bar going, woo, what a battle with those space pirates that was.
Yeah, I have a few space bucks to spend beyond the gas and food. How am I going to handle this,
I mean, you and I love BattleTech. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what does it take? Like, usually sometimes months to get to your next destination,
Yeah.
Because faster than light travel, but you've got to rest for like a week at a time, recharging the batteries on the FTL drives.
Yep. Yeah, and doing repairs, refits, things like that.
Yeah.
Like that's just downtime.
That's liminal space. That's downtime all there for you, So ultimately, when it comes down to it, like, you've got kind of two ways in your games that you can handle liminal spaces like this.
Yeah.
And that's essentially, do you play them or do you skip them?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that it is literally just that.
It's just that kind of simple.
I mean, people are like, well, you have to run them, or you should always skip them, But I feel that there's a lot to be done with the table in discussing this on what they feel is right. So you have to answer the question for you and your group.
Yeah.
And sometimes that changes throughout the game. Like, you may set up in session 0 that you're like, hey guys, shopping and downtime is going to be done in a very short period so that we can stick with the story and get through the adventure. So, don't get too attached to, your local merchants and things like that.
Yeah, sure.
If there's a scene, those NPCs are scene NPCs, but like, unless you ask specifically to go find someone and have a conversation, we're just going to slide through that. And then 3 adventures in, after going to the same street dock 9 times, they're like, can we get his name and like do something nice for him? And suddenly it becomes extra scenes that now extend out because your players are invested. So it's really, that is something that can be dependent on the table and the campaign.
Oh, yeah,
and how it progresses.
And I'm not, like, I don't even know that it needs to be as formal as that,
Yeah.
Like, I personally, like, I like kind of a middle ground. I like to do slice of life stuff. I like to overdevelop my NPCs and make it really feel like you guys are in a living, breathing world. I feel like I excel at that as a storyteller, and I feel like everybody enjoys those aspects of my game. So I lean into them, and I enjoy putting those sorts of things in my game. But at the same time, though, I will still vibe check the table and kind of go like, all right, I mean, you get this news that there's a party going on tonight. Does anybody need to role play the afternoon, or should we just jump to the party? No, I think we can just jump to the party. Anybody? Party? Yeah, let's just jump to the party. Cool. Boom.
Yeah.
That's like 5 hours I just blew past by saying, what's the vibe at the table, you know? But yeah, no, I mean, there have been other times where we've gone whole stretches where we role play every moment of the day, basically.
Yeah.
Doing little skips for little bits of travel here and there, but
Right.
it's just like, I'm going to go to the store. Okay, here's what happens at the store.
Right.
Now we're going to go to the pub. Okay, here's what happens at the pub.
Right, and that becomes part of the story then, because those events become in their own rights, kind of B plots and character story building moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So okay, so to hit the question, let's start with skip.
Yeah,
I think that's the easy. You keep it short. The end button. We're just moving on. We're hitting the page down.
Right. Press A to skip cutscene.
Exactly.
So
what is it? F for respects.
Yeah, press F to pay respects. So there's a lot of it. Believe it or not, there's a couple different ways you can skip through things.
Agreed.
The first one is obviously the quickest, the easiest. The empty space. Mm-hmm. We just call the hand wave. You hand wave it. Time passes. It's empty.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. Next encounter. Kind of like I was just saying, like, do we need to role play the afternoon, or do we go straight to the party? We go straight to the party. Cool. It's party time.
Yep. I think the only thing with this one that hits in my head is I think it's great. It goes right on, and in all honesty, saves the narrator or storyteller a huge amount of frustration.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can always run into the issue where you had one of the players who wanted to prep something, or wants to get into detail with something with someone beforehand, and now you've cut that role play or that agency off a little bit.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm usually hesitant to do the empty space or the hand wave for exactly that reason, because I almost always have at least one player at my table go, oh, wait, I wanted to...
Yeah.
And so then you've got to kind of like go roll it back. All right, hold on. Okay, so what did you want to do real quick? Okay, does anybody else have anything?
Right.
And then I feel like I'm waitressing at Applebee's again.
No, and honestly,
okay,
that's a huge piece of it.
I'm getting a side of ranch and a new Coke for you. Does anybody else need anything while I'm in the kitchen?
Right. And inevitably, you get back with their meals and they're like,
all right, here's your ranch. Here's your Coke. Can I get a refill on coffee? Yes, you can get a refill on coffee. Does anybody else need anything?
Yeah. I think then the next one really is the one that gets, I think, thrown around a lot, but the truth of it is it's the hard move.
Yeah.
It's the decision by the storyteller to skip. And you're dictating what, not just skipping, but you're dictating the events that happen during the skip.
Yeah.
I think this happens a lot with journeys, in my opinion, of where, like, the storyteller doesn't want this, boat journey, cart journey, whatever. Video games do this all the time. You get in the cart, you leave, you arrive at the next place. Nothing happened. At least nothing exciting happened. And for that, it is very quick, but it does allow you some time to describe things.
Yeah. I said the hard move is a little more, what you just described is a little more like the skip. The hard move is more like you get a cutscene.
Right, and that's what I was kind of getting to, is that it gives the storyteller the ability to say, these are the events that transpire between A and B.
Right.
They don't get to throw something extra on top of it, like, oh, I took my own horse, or whatever, I'm going to do these things before we go or along the way.
Yeah, the important thing is here, you're not asking for player agency,
Nope.
You're not asking for player input, you're just simply saying, like you said, this is a move we as storytellers do a lot for travel time, where you're like, okay, you guys take your carts, it's rainy most of the way, the road is difficult, but you get there on time, you get there late, you're a little bit raggled, but there's room at the inn, so
yeah.
Now we begin.
Yeah,
now we
you did this for us in the beginning of our first adventure for your game, going between Anvil and the town in the Highlands.
Yeah.
We literally... You told us that it was rainy and cold and nasty, and the trip kind of sucked, but it wasn't horrific. It was like going through the rainy Highlands of Scotland, and it was marshy, but you got there. You're a little, you're not worse for wear, but it's definitely not uncomfortable.
But you're glad to have dry ground underneath you,
exactly.
And a tent over your head.
Exactly.
And boom, done.
Yep.
I gave you a little narration, didn't ask for your input, didn't need your input. It wasn't important. because it wasn't an encounter, you know?
Right. It wasn't plot needing to move forward in any direction.
Now, the pros of this, obviously, is that this also goes super quick. It does require a little more storytelling on the storyteller's part, but I mean, that's literally the name of your job, so
Right.
congratulations. It doesn't really take much more than a couple sentences, just like we just gave you very solid examples there. Now, the cons of this, obviously, is that since the storyteller is dictating actual story beats to the players, it can sometimes cue that you are looking for input or interaction, because it's... So usually we give, we set the scene, and like, this is happening, and that's happening, and that's happening, and we usually follow that with what do you guys do?
Right.
And there is sometimes a bit of a shift at your tables where you'll be saying, okay, you guys are on this travel, and this happens, this happens, this happens. And then you'll find your players going like, okay, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or, and you're like, well, I really wasn't, kind of asking for your input. Like, we're just going to arrive there, and,
Right.
and we'll handle that when we get to the place, And that can be a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Or it kind of like it knocks your players out of their vibe a little bit.
Yeah, it's
Disjointed. It can feel a little disjointed.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of that, which often happens, at least that I've noticed, is when you do go into, okay, I'm making a hard move, and you give a description of events, sometimes your players are still locked in the previous thoughts, and they don't notice that scenes changed. So suddenly they're now somewhere else, and they're confused. Even though you've dictated events have changed, because they're not involved, they're not captured by the moment.
Right.
And suddenly they're like, whoa, wait, we left? No, I had things I needed to do. I'm like, no, I said I was making a hard move, and we were going to, we are now, and you may not even say hard move, you just be like, you guys find yourself on the road and make an easy pass, there's no difficulties, you make it to the Highlands, and the sun rises, and suddenly it's a brighter day for all of you as you come into, Lentil City, and they're like, wait, we're in a different city? No, I had things to do in the other city.
Yeah.
And so, and it could even be you in the next scene with other things going on when that person wakes up, the player wakes up, and their character goes, what year is it? And it's true, because again, until a player is interacting with it, they're really not necessarily engaged. So.
Yeah. So our last one is the bookkeeping.
Yeah, I find that this happens on the other side of things with making the bookkeeping easier by cutting down what's really going on.
Yeah, and this is also known as the express shopping.
Yes.
This is like all pretense of role play is dropped. You're like, everybody kind of just goes out of character. The books, the charts come out. Shopping is done by simply saying what you're buying. You mark off your currency. Nobody's in character. You don't have to interact with the shopkeeper, etc., etc. It's all quick. It's logistical, just so you can all just get through it. You can get your sword. You can get your torches. You can get your 50 feet of rope, and we're done. Like, let's not make this a thing. This doesn't have to consume our day. Let's get to the dungeon where the fun is.
Right. I think some of at least the pros on it for me, is that it does move very quickly. There are no frills. It gets everything that the characters want done without it becoming a conversational nightmare where some of your players are literally falling asleep while the other ones are trying to negotiate and pine through something. But at the same regard, some players live part of their characters' lives in the bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful in knowing what your characters are in that world, you can cut off a lot of their agency of being their character.
Yeah,
if the character has haggling, or is a merchant person, or is good at getting things, what you've done is basically hamstringed their ability to enjoy the game.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be no different than hand-waving a fight and having a fighter with, 9 fighting feats and, a crap ton of hit points and a ridiculous amount of shield and stuff, and they wanted to go in and stomp the yard, and you're like, yeah, you're a fighter, you take out all these guys, no big deal. Okay, guys, as you're digging through the loot, and you're like, excuse me, what?
Right. How fun is that for the person who built their entire character to be the star of the show and have the limelight when you just wave away the limelight,
Exactly.
The other problem that the bookkeeping can have is some players do get bogged down in it from a player standpoint, not a character standpoint. Where they get into the minutia and the micromanaging of like, oh, hold on a second, in this one source book, I want to get, this one obscure thing, but I'm going to get this variant of it. And you're like, it has been 45 minutes and we are still not in character and still shopping because you can't decide between the 3 or 4 different items that you wanted to. Can you just give me a list? I'll approve it. And we'll move on.
Or even you get into the, I'm making scrolls, and this is how I'm doing it to this degree, and now you're like, is any of this legitimate? Like, here's my math, and here's what I'm doing, and here, okay, well, you're off on this, and this is not possible. Okay, well, then I've got to rejigger everything, because I'm actually going to do this instead with this, if this is all the time I've got.
Right.
And so now you're doing all this heavy logistic bookkeeping work for like 5 scrolls that this person's creating in a very specific amount of time.
And straight up, like, a lot of this stuff just isn't fun for some people. I'm reminded a lot of like early days of Critical Role too. Like, they used to harangue Travis Willingham about this because Travis's eyes would just roll right into the back of his head while anybody was doing shopping. And I remember Taliesin at one point. This quote that I still use to this day is Taliesin just grinning at him and going, "It's going to be a shopping episode, Travis. We are going to buy so many imaginary things."
But at the same time, there's a joy for certain people in that. And it's about reading your table. It's about understanding when those moments need to happen so that everybody can have fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why do you put, gold or currency or new yen or, whatever if you're not going to spend it on things,
Right.
Occasionally you've got to buy supplies. You might have a special plan you've got in mind and stuff like that. I personally I don't like keeping track of coinage and stuff like that, so I've switched my Savage Worlds game over to the alternate wealth die rules.
Yeah.
And you just make rolls to see, and there's some rules for how that die roll comes out to what you can buy with it and how far your spending power goes and stuff like that. But it makes a lot of assumptions about just what cash you have on hand and whatnot. And
right, which I think makes a lot of sense. It also makes it very challenging when someone gets into detail.
Yeah.
But again, back to the beginning of this is how you establish whether or not it's something they're interested in, and as time goes on, you adjust it.
Exactly.
So
those are a few ways to skip,
to not play
the in between spaces. So, what if you are one of those groups, or even within the group, one of those specific instances where you do want to role play out these in between spaces?
Well, I think you kind of described it earlier, where it's a matter of as you reach an in between space. For instance, you're just finishing up in a specific town, the group knows it has to go to another location, and they make their decision of like, yeah, we're going to go here, and you're like, okay, well, there's no problem. You find a ship that's going to be taking you over there. Now, that being said, let's discuss this. Do you guys just want to go on, take the ship, end up over there? It's going to be like a 1.5 week long journey, no big deal, and you guys show up there. You're all able-bodied. It's obviously a crew that goes out on the ship all the time, and it's not that big of a deal. Or do you guys want a high-sea pirates adventure, which might have a couple of encounters and things like that involved in the process? Because they might want to be briefly pirates, or something on the high seas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's okay. That's totally fine. That gives you a side adventure that allows it to go out and do things.
Dead honest, and this is one of the reasons why I always vibe check my table, because honestly, sometimes their answers will surprise you. You may just be like, oh, of course, they're just going to skip the whole travel part and get on to the next thing. And you're going to have like 3 out of your 4 players going like, no, this is great. I want to have a high seas adventure. I want pirates. I want to get attacked by a kraken. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, we bought Ghost of Saltmarsh, or, we're playing 7th Sea. Like, why are we not using the cool ship-to-ship combat rules? Let's,
exactly.
I'm a big proponent of like listen to your players.
Sure.
Your players will tell you what they want out of a game. And if you can find it in your plot, in your theme, in your in the pacing of your story, to give them what they want, by all means. Like it's gonna, if your players are telling you what they're going to have more fun with, I mean, that's a cheat code right there.
I agree, and I would encourage storytellers as you're moving through, especially sandbox adventures. This should be in the forefront of your mind before you finish or think about what the next steps are, so that you can prepare. Just as much as you are able to pull back. So and I say this, and I'm going to explain what I mean by this. If you're saying, if you come up to a point where they're going to be getting on a boat and your first thought is, I'm going to have at least a 3-session adventure for them on this journey and it's going to be great, and your players are exhausted from the last thing they did, and they're just like, and you're like, okay, guys, I got this 3-adventure story ready for you, or we can just make it over to the other side. They might be like, you know what, I really don't want more plot other than getting to this location. Can we just finish this adventure?
Yeah.
Like, I want to get this guy and move on.
Plot fatigue's a thing.
It is. I have seen it. I have had it. I still have it in things.
It's kind of happening in your game.
It is
I think
very much happening in my game.
A lot of the feedback you got from your last session was essentially your character going like, this has been very interesting, but I think we need to wrap it up.
Right.
Like it's been enough games where it's just getting to the point where it's like, maybe it's starting to drag,
Yep. And let's move it on.
No, good news is we are right at the end of the plot, essentially.
Yep.
But it was like, I think most of our feedback was like, so help me if you throw yet another twist into this.
Nope. No intentions. This has been enjoyable, but it is time to finish. And for that very reason, like, after this one, and there's no loss here, when you guys decide what you're going to do next, I'm going to say, like, do you just guys want to end up there? It's going to be a journey. You guys know how you'll basically get there, and I know what you would take to get there. Do we just want to get there to start the next portion of the adventure?
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to handle it, versus trying to figure out how I'm going to adventure you guys to the next spot.
Sure.
That's not always necessary. Be prepared to just be like, no, you guys, and I can easily just to say, do you want some downtime? Do you want a downtime session in between, just one, where literally it is effectively under your control? I'm going to set you guys in a home base type of situation, and you can tell me which home base you want. I'll give you an option of 3.
Sure.
Because I feel like that might be a thing after this adventure, especially in my game. And I need to be prepared to either give you guys something tasty to run into, or back off completely and just be like, yeah, I'll give you guys something to have a little bit of RP.
Yeah. I feel like, especially after recent events, if you gave Ravana the opportunity to go home, she wouldn't leave again and finish the adventure.
That's a possibility.
I would think long and hard about retiring the character right then and there.
I mean, I would not put it against you, but I think events would drag you back. I think the group would drag you back.
Yeah, I definitely. It would be like one of those things of like, all right, but I'll do it, but I'm going to complain about it the whole time.
Exactly. There'd be the sigh would last the entire length of the journey.
Yep.
So, okay. So now we've stepped into, let's talk about role play.
Yeah.
Role playing that liminal space. I mean, we're talking about roleplay. We're not talking about liminal space. Now we're literally talking about turning it into something.
Yeah, it kind of becomes an encounter then. It doesn't mean we stop role-playing. These are our characters' lives. They are things that take place during our lives, even if they're not terribly as exciting as a battle or a chase scene or something like that.
Right,
But
right.
there are definitely times where, we're going to engage with the world. I do a lot of these in my game, where you guys are just sitting around the Fighters Guild. I'll have a couple of my NPCs show up. They might have some insight as to what's going on, allow you guys to kind of talk about things or react to what they're doing. Again, like I said earlier, it kind of makes the world feel more lived in,
Yeah.
Big fan of Deep Space Nine. I've mentioned this a lot on the thing. Like, how many times in Deep Space Nine do you see, like, just a scene of 2 characters having a conversation in Quark's bar?
Root beer.
Yeah.
The root
Try
beer.
this. It's
Yeah.
called root beer. It's
terrible.
awful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It's sweet. It's sickening.
Sweet and cloying, and it gets under your skin. You start to like it after a while, just like the Federation.
Yep. But that's the thing is, in that sense, you as a storyteller get that space as well to bring the feeling, to bring the story. Either that, and also to alter things a little bit, to give you the space to change, to start to change. So if you're in between acts, having that full role play allows some room to let other NPCs evolve around the PCs.
Yeah.
And change the feeling of the story. Maybe it goes from despair to a little bit of hope.
Sure.
To a little bit of wonder, to a little bit of exploration,
Sure.
a little more depth.
And like one of the other things that is a really great thing that comes from role playing your liminal spaces like this is that you do get these sort of like character moments where you can build bonds with NPCs. And the reason I bring that up as a very important point is because dramatically speaking, okay, narratively speaking, how many times have we watched a TV show or a movie or something like that where they put a character in front of you and they're like, this is Bob, and then they kill Bob and they're like, isn't it awful what happened to Bob? And you're like, I don't know, I just met him like 3 minutes ago. I don't know him. I don't have any emotional bond to him. I don't really care about him. Now, if you had spent the last 45 minutes with Bob and gotten to know his life, his loves, his fears, his motivations, the
that investment,
past traumas and stuff like that, you get to know Bob. You start caring about Bob as a person, and then the plot kills him off, and then you're like, no, Bob, he was my friend.
Yeah.
Now you care.
Yep.
It's the same outcome. We still killed Bob in exactly the same way, but one of them you're shedding tears over, and the other one you're like, okay, well, because Bob's dead.
Yeah. There's a great short that a guy described called The Milk Run Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole campaign starts out with the adventurers taking this bunny to a young princess. Basically, it was a toy it was crafted. It was in a special box. They didn't know what they were delivering, but it had to get to the prince so that he could get it to the princess in the courtyard. And there was all kinds of like minor things that happened. But the milk run ends with them getting this box with this bunny, and they see the little princess get her bunny, and they're very happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the first act, there's a tragic situation that happens. Basically, the big bad guy has a dragon come in, do a bunch of damage, and the players are left in a liminal scene where they're sifting through the rubble to find their own things.
Mm-hmm.
And as they're leaving, they don't know because they've lost direction. They're basically just following a direction because they can't see the sun. The clouds have blocked everything out, so they're just trying to make their way out of the city. And they realize that they're not making it through the front gates, but they're making it through the rubble of the castle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they find the bunny.
Yeah.
But they know that people were taken from the castle, and so they assume that she was taken. And they literally said she's getting her bunny back. And they carried it till the end of the campaign.
Yeah.
Because that bunny suddenly had meaning from the first milk run through.
Yeah.
And that's investment. That's what we talked about during the investment episode. And that those liminal moments that you have can really change the feel of a game because it allows your players to explore their feelings about the story and the people within it that they've made connections with.
Yep, absolutely.
Be prepared that if you role play, things like this will take forever.
Sure.
Especially if you decide to do liminal space for a specific character.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, this is where I kind of say it's not liminal anymore, and that's where things can shift. So if you've got, let's say, a player while you're, maybe you're doing a bookkeeping where people are shopping and stuff, and one of your players' bookkeeping things that they want to do is like, hey, I want to go make a deal with the Thieves Guild. I'm going to run a few contracts for them to get in their good graces. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, you're looking to do skill checks? Yeah, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff with that. All right, pause. How about next session I open with that? Mm-hmm. Bring somebody with you. That's my thing. Is you figure it out with the group who you want to bring, but we're going to make this a scene. That is not a liminal space role play. That's one person showboating and the rest of the table sitting there with their thumbs up their butt waiting for 45 minutes to an hour.
Right.
And that's not fair to the table, but it's fair for that player, and that's the key. Is allowing those players to bloom in the light, but everybody knows that's what's about to happen.
Sure. I think that's probably the two big complications with role playing out your in between spaces, your downtimes and stuff like that, because you've got there's like you were mentioning the when does a downtime role play become an encounter, become a social encounter, or otherwise become an encounter, But the other thing is that even if you never move into that thing of like, okay, I'm actually doing things that move a plot,
Right.
You still can end up with like the two characters that want to discuss their favorite flavors of ale for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
While everybody else sits at the table going like, okay, this is great, but we only play once a month. Can we not spend, 20% of our game session BSing about stuff that doesn't matter and doesn't move the story forward,
Right. Like,
there
do we really need
limit
that
to it.
dump? Do we need that character dump? Especially like if it's at the end or the beginning of a game where you're maybe getting to know people, that may not be too bad. Everybody can get to know each other. But like in the middle of the game where you're literally just BSing with a bunch of NPCs and like plot isn't necessary, you're not getting special lore, like nothing's coming out of this, it gets monotonous.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's hard to figure out when that's happening though.
One thing we have had good luck with in our collective switch to Savage Worlds is the interlude.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring this one up because I know not everybody here is playing Savage Worlds, but I think it's a kind of mechanic, and even if you don't go mechanically, it's at least a storytelling practice that is easy enough to kind of transplant into other games and stuff.
I completely agree.
And so it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up here. So I will mention that the rules are from Savage Worlds, but you don't have to be playing Savage Worlds to use this particular thing as the interlude here. So what an interlude is in Savage Worlds is essentially you give the story to the players, pardon me, an opportunity to do a little storytelling themselves. Now there's a chart. Essentially,
yeah, there's a mechanic set.
There's a prompt, essentially, and you're supposed to like draw playing cards, and the suit and the value of that card kind of dictates what the topic they should talk about is. But of course, you don't have to use those. I've oftentimes written prompts for my players directly that pertain directly to what their characters are doing, what their characters are personally interested in, things like that within the span of my story. And you can just give those to them and say, like, okay, tell me a little bit about what your character is thinking about this situation or how they feel about the introduction of this particular character or something like that. The idea is to allow these players to do a little storytelling on their own, a little plot exposition, and it can be in character. It could be out of character. You can do these as like stories that your PCs are telling each other around the campfire as they're camping, mid travel to their dungeon or whatever. Or you can do them as just solo scenes of like meanwhile in Lord Thalian's apartment.
Right.
When no one's technically looking, but he gets to tell a story about what is happening there that at least, if not the characters, the other players at the table get a glimpse into Thalian's character.
Sorry about that.
What's going on?
Sorry, my door just popped and it activated my phone. So we had somebody at my door. Sorry, I apologize that I had to send somebody up there.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I think the one that I always run into as an issue is that you get analysis paralysis. People don't know what they can do, which is a question we always get in D&D with new players. Is like, I don't know what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so with these kind of things where it's given it to them as an option to enter into roleplay as an option, like you can do this.
Sure.
It's a choice. They lock up and go quiet. Oh wait, hold on a second.
Another problem? So anyways, they can lock up, they can kind of go quiet.
I apologize, I had a whole bunch of chaos going there, but they can lock up, they can go quiet, because there's nothing in it. But Interlude, specifically in Savage World, kind of presents some options there.
Yeah.
For them to be able to get into.
No, some options, but like I said, you can kind of write your own prompts that are directly something that character cares about,
Exactly.
I think my last set of interludes, I didn't roll out of the book. It was something I wrote specific prompts for every single character at the table.
Yeah, when I did it on the D&D side, I stole the idea and brought it in. I kind of gave you guys a past, present, and future option.
Yes.
Of being able to explain out a situation so that anyone could kind of like, okay, well, how do you, here's the challenge. Explain this either through past, present, or future. And kind of left it open-ended to let your characters explore things and express themselves in a different way. Or express their feelings about a situation.
Now, the other component too of doing interludes is that there is essentially a reward for doing so. They are optional, so if you do have somebody, I know I've got a couple socially anxious people at my table who don't necessarily like having the limelight shine directly on them.
Yeah.
If they're having one of those days where they don't feel that they're particularly up to it, you can absolutely decline an interlude. Like nobody's forcing you to, all eyes are on you. Come up with story, entertain us, But at the same time, though, if you do, in Savage Worlds we give a Benny for it, which again is a easily translatable. And like if you're playing 5th edition, give an inspiration.
Yeah.
If you're playing 7th C, give a drama die. Something like that. If you've got some sort of a currency, Shadowrun has edge points, things like that. Give something like that out. Just a little token for having contributed directly to the well-being of the story.
Yeah, there's a reason why we call it tabletop roleplay and not just tabletop gaming.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Exactly. And I think this is great because a lot of players do like to have some narrative control.
Yeah.
I think most players sit down at the table and want to tell a story about their character. They want their character to be a dramatis personae who has things going on and looks cool in their own light, and stuff like that. And so when you sit down and hand the reins directly to that player and go like, tell me something awesome about your character, here, I'll give you a prompt. How does your character feel about this? Oh, they're really angry. Really? Why are they angry? Describe that. Get into some detail. Oh, well, they're going to blah, 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 and, they as they're thinking about this, they're gripping their sword, and as he gets to the thinking about the part of what what the villain did to him, he drives his sword into the wall. Like, okay, wow, and then later on, you're somebody goes to that character's room and you're like, yeah, and you see like the wood is splintered on the wall where there's an obvious sword hole, sword-shaped hole in the wall, and they're like, oh, did you have a problem over there? No, nothing you need to concern yourself with. Okay.
But the player knows. The character can ask the questions,
exactly.
And that's the fun part.
And everybody kind of knows. Everybody kind of knows at the table, and there's a little bit of extra detail now added to that room, and it's nice. Everybody kind of likes to have those moments where their character has an impact, has an insight, is the main character of the story for just a moment,
And I think that kind of leads me to the next one, because there are systems that have mechanics, like the One Ring has travel mechanics, which are good. When we went over that in the way that it handles fatigue and characters using up their abilities and moving through things based upon the distance, I think it's really good. I think it's a good way to handle that liminal space. But we both kind of leaned into this a little bit, this idea that there are character classes, like in D&D specifically, that have skills and abilities to do and handle that liminal space.
Yeah,
whether
exactly.
it's hunting, whether it's survival, whether it's knowing the city and the people within it, whether it's bargaining with merchants and things like that to get better deals and stuff. So that's where it comes back to, like, hand waving things is one thing, but being able to actually give them space to be able to be their character in the class, in the mechanical sense, and shine. You have to make sure that you're not taking that away from them. As much as a fighter, as much as the mage, if you've got a lore master who's going into a library and you're like, yeah, we're going to do the research, I need you to do a research roll, I need you can assist, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
You guys figure out this data. No, like, you just stole from that person's whole character.
Yeah, exactly. A large part of filling these liminal spaces, especially like travel with like rangers and druids in your group or whatever, is just about being a fan of your players. Being a fan of the characters at your table, and allowing everybody to do the thing that their character is good at and be the star of the story when within their own bailiwick.
Yeah.
Like you gave the example earlier of like, what if we glossed over a fight?
Yeah.
And just said, okay, you guys kick everybody's asses. Here's the loot table, Yeah. and the fighter with nine fighting edges, and and the heavy armor and the +1 greatsword is going, okay,
Yeah.
thanks,
Yeah.
And it's the same way with like your druids and your rangers, where I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the biggest criticisms I've heard, and maybe they're addressing this in 1D&D. I haven't. To be fair, I have not looked a lot into D&D 1 or 1D&D or whatever. Does the one go first or after? I cannot remember.
Don't look at me.
Anyways, I haven't looked into the rules update for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, the extended errata at this point of not errata, they have a term for it, but
so I don't know if they've addressed this or not, but one of the major criticisms I've heard is that Rangers' special abilities allow you to bypass a lot of the complications. Ergo, having one in your party means that you don't have those encounters.
right.
And I don't necessarily think that that's like as big of a detriment as you think it is.
Right.
Like, okay, I suppose a novice storyteller would be like, oh yeah, you just don't have these encounters because you've got a ranger. Congratulations, you arrive safe and sound.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's a moment there where you take some time to narrate, even if it's just one of those like hard move skips, where you just like, I'm going to dictate to you how it went. But, shine the spotlight a little bit on the ranger and the group and just be like, yeah, X, Y, and Z complications come up along the way, but because your ranger, is doing his job, it kind of gets handled like this, it kind of gets handled like that.
Or even give them the reins to say how it gets handled. We always talk about
precisely where I was going to go with that.
Yeah,
yes.
At the end of a combat round with a fighter, where the thing's about to die, you're like, how do you finish him?
Right.
How does it end?
Describe to me its grisly end. How do you want to do this?
Do you want to end him in a grisly way, or do you just want to knock him out and tie him up? Like, that's your choice. At this point, the combat is over.
Yeah.
You tell me how it ends. Do the same thing with your ranger or your druid.
Yeah, you would have come up with an encounter with goblins, but your ranger allows you to bypass it. Ranger? How do we bypass it?
Yeah.
And yeah, give them the moment, because, oh man, your players will surprise you sometimes with some of the brilliant stuff they come up with. I did this my last game where our quote-unquote big dumb fighter was on security detail. He got himself hired as a bodyguard to a noble that was at this party, and that's how he got himself into the party, right?
Yep.
And at one point, he botched a roll, and so I was like, okay, describe to me your big social faux pas. How do you screw up? And he's like, oh, it's real simple. I went to go get my the noble I'm working for a drink, and I get one for myself. And that was it. That was the social faux pas of like, yeah, he's just drinking on the job. Oh no, I'm not supposed to do that, am I?
No.
And he like spits the drink back out into the glass,
puts it back
on the tray. And we had such a great laugh about this. But like, had I not asked him, I wouldn't have. It was so subtle, but it was so effective, and it really was as big of a social faux pas as would have been botching the role. And it's just brilliant. And I'm so glad that I asked him, because I wouldn't have come up with that answer.
No, and that's the thing that can give you, and it tells you a lot about the character.
Yeah.
It gives them that moment, and it gives you something for later on you can make a note about.
Yeah.
Because you can have someone run into that fighter later in another liminal space and be like, oh, that's right, you were the hulking gentleman who didn't know how to keep his drink. Even at a party. I do remember that. You were quite amusing.
Yeah, exactly. And it also keeps your players engaged, because if they know that they're going to get asked, like, what is their reaction to certain thing? How do they accomplish a certain goal? What does this die roll look like when it hits the table? Not only are you keeping them engaged, but like they're thinking about their character's place in the game, in the game world, in the story, and stuff like that. So,
and it again keeps them engaged. So, doesn't take agency. Keeps them engaged. There's your 2 connection points.
Yep.
So,
and the last thing I think I want to bring up too is like downtime mechanics.
Yeah.
Downtime mechanics. I think we had another episode where we did talk about these in depth, so I'm kind of gloss over them. But like, downtime is literally when you're between adventures, right?
Yeah.
You're just not doing anything for whether it's a week, whether it's a couple days, whether it might be a couple months or a year. Your characters might not be out there doing their thing all the time, and then you're going to have downtime. I know a lot of games have downtime mechanics.
Yes, without a
Um,
doubt.
So this isn't even something I'm like. My suggestion simply is look up your downtime mechanics for your game system.
Yeah.
Savage Worlds has them as a swag product. It's a Savage Worlds Adventure Guild, I think it is. Which are basically fan-made add-ons for the rules. And I do know that there are downtime rules in the upcoming Fantasy Companion.
Yes.
And there are D&D downtime rules in the DM's Guide.
There's a couple also in, I think in Tasha's has additional one. And
okay, yeah.
There's, I can't remember the other book that has a few other downtime mechanics. The one thing that I'm going to encourage first-time storytellers who are listening to this to understand is when we're talking about downtime, we are not talking about time between your sessions.
Yeah.
Or even if it is an extended time. For instance, if the group is traveling from one location to another during a plot, I am heavily going to suggest that you do not classify that as downtime.
No, because that's travel time. Travel time
Correct.
isn't downtime.
Yeah, if it's you are done with this plot.
Right.
These players have literally nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You as the storyteller are going to advance them or whatever. That is downtime because they want to continue on to a new plot.
As an example, in my game, after you guys got back from Skingrad and doing the whole vampire thing over there, there was a month and a half break just in the story of like, okay, it's fall now.
Right.
You know? And I was like, okay, what do you guys do during that time? And so we made some downtime rolls. We did a little bit of role play to kind of explain what those downtime rolls were, but like, it was very mechanical. And we just, a couple people got a couple bonuses because they were working on themselves and picked up a new edge, and we kind of explained how those all things happen, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing.
I remember in Mouse Guard we had the winter. The winter is the downtime. It is when people hunker down because you're a mouse, and 4 inches of snow really is a lot.
Yeah, 4 inches of snow is what happened in Buffalo.
Right. It is 4 full mice height. That is a lot of snow.
Yep.
And so an inch is still too much.
Yeah.
So you just hunker down and you live and figure out, how you're going to make it through the winter and do your things in the winter. And because of that, that is a time between plots, between stories.
Yep.
And so when your players ask how much downtime they have between sessions, the answer is 0. Unless you're done with a plot. Do not give your players that flexibility to craft up a bunch of crap and become a super warrior between like level 3 and level 4 in the middle of your plot.
Yep.
That just stay away from that. I'm going to encourage that. Don't worry about it. Set it to the side. Let your players whine a little bit if they feel that they're not getting all their cool bennies. Tell them to play the freaking game. So
You sound like you're speaking from experience.
Yeah, I may have had some history there. So, hey, I have a microphone and they don't. These are my topics.
That's fair.
We did have some questions from today, but I think
like
we
we
got both
addressed
of these.
them.
Nevim asked, "Do you have to play all the downtime between adventures?" Flat out, the answer is no.
No,
you do not.
Absolutely, and probably should skip a bunch of it. It's just meaningless filler space.
Yeah, and in all honesty, downtime, if it's honest to goodness downtime, don't role play it.
Yeah, bookkeep it and skip it.
Bookkeep it and move on.
Bookkeep it and skip
Make
it,
sure that the role playing stays during the game, during the session, during the storytelling phase of the story, not the downtime.
Yep.
If it's role playing, it's either going to be an interlude that's happening during a short rest or some kind of intermission between the games, or it's a scene and it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't be afraid to pass some of this off to your players. If you have creative and engaged players at your table,
sure.
Or even to encourage them to be creative and engaged, if they tell you something like, oh yeah, I want to look into this, like, don't be afraid to be like, okay, cool. Tell me what you come up with, tell me what you're looking for. Tell me how that comes out. Ask for a role and then ask them to explain what that role looks like, what that level of success looks like. And it offloads a lot of the creativity that you may need to spend coming up with this stuff onto them. They get some input into the story, and you don't have to do the work.
Exactly.
So John S., one of our new Discord members,
Welcome,
asks, How do you keep liminal spaces interesting or engaging without sacrificing their brevity?
Engagement, I think, is the key word there.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do is make sure you engage as much as you can with the players during those. If it is meant to be interesting, it may be interesting to you as the storyteller, but that may not be interesting to the players because they're not doing anything. But the moment that they're engaged with it, that it matters to them, that is when things will change. That is when they will lean forward to the table and start taking notice.
Sure. And I think a lot of it, a lot of the whole, like, keeping it engaging without sacrificing the brevity is vibe checking your table.
100%.
Just seeing who's engaged with it at the table. Just seeing, what the interest level on various faces across the table is. Are your characters leaning in? Are they making eye contact? Do they seem to be listening? Or are, 5 out of the 6 of them pulling out their phones?
Right.
That right there tells me how engaging it is for the table. Should I pour more energy into this? Is the table enjoying it? Or do I skip through it as quick as possible to get my players' attention back?
Right. And again, make sure you have their attention when the scene changes. That is always the most important thing, because the last thing that you want as a storyteller is to feel like they don't know what's going on.
Yep.
Because then re-explaining it is even worse. And
sometimes, like we said earlier, like the vibe at the table is don't sacrifice the brevity.
No.
You don't necessarily need to make your liminal spaces brief if everybody's enjoying it and everybody wants to engage with it.
Yep. Just let them always make it aware of whether or not that is a sacrifice that the group is making.
Yeah.
Because they're like, yeah, we're interested in this. And so this was fun, but let's not make this an every time thing.
Oh, sure.
You got it.
I always think back to my Battle of the Bands episode.
No, that was great.
We had a 4 or 5 day journey to the next city down the Gold Road. And the Gold Road in my game setting is a very well-traveled highway. Like, you're not going to have random encounters. There are guards at regular intervals that walk the Gold Road and stuff like that. You're really not going to run into, like, bandits.
No, yeah.
Things like that.
Nothing harmful, truly.
Yeah, it's like being on the freeway. Like, you're not, you might see the occasional wildlife, but, like, bandits and, like, wolves aren't going to attack you on the Gold Road.
No.
The wildlife around there knows it's a person path. Stay away from it,
Right, but you can have encounters or scenes.
Sure. And we had, like, there's a roadside inn. Essentially, you guys decided to stop instead of camp for the night. You stopped at the roadside inn. They were having a little battle of the bards going on. You had a bard in your group. And great fun was had that adventure, and that's all it was. It was a travel adventure,
and everybody was involved. That was the key. We were all group engaged.
Literally the whole episode was liminal space.
Yep.
It was a travel episode. You know.
Yep.
You can do those occasionally.
Yep.
I wouldn't say make a habit of them, but you can do those occasionally. So, like, without making it brief, is sometimes the thing you sacrifice, not the engagement. So.
All right.
I think we have
belabored the topic.
Not belabored. No, we nailed it. We nailed it.
We did. But to keep it brief, we have our continuing series of Second Wednesdays, which is going to continue with System Spotlights. Again, we got a lot of good feedback on this from various people, and we are going to continue it because it's good for us.
Absolutely.
We love it.
Absolutely. So next week we're going to be talking about Urban Shadows, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse setting.
Yeah, we brought it up a number of times, but we've never actually dug into it.
Yeah.
So
it's the contemporary urban fantasy genre, which is just something I absolutely adore. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Another Powered by the Apocalypse systems, which, believe it or not, for their frequency of appearance in the modern gaming landscape, it's surprising we don't talk about more Powered by the Apocalypse games.
Yeah.
But here we're getting back to our roots.
And it's a system that I hold in my heart as something that I want to run more and want to be more involved with. And I had the brief thought of not going Savage Seas, but going Powered Seas.
Oh.
And having, like, character class types instead. And I was like, that actually might work even better.
Powered by the Seventh Apocalypse.
Something like that. Or Salty Seas or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I like the concept of it. I think it's a different way of looking at it, and I'm going to it's going to be nice going back and reopening the mechanics and the rules and some of the storytelling that's in there, because I think it's wonderful. I really, really do. And nothing says more fun than getting away from fantasy and stepping back into fantasy. Contemporary fantasy,
but with cars and guns
and skyscrapers. So yeah, I think it'll be a good time, and I hope all of you will enjoy this with us. So,
alrighty, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to hear from you. Drop some questions up there. Talk with the other great storytellers. Bounce story ideas off of them.
yeah, happens every day.
Always great discussion going on there. You can find the link to our Discord on our Twitter, as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank all of our Patreon members who support us every month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Veteran, Hulavu, and Sean. We really appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You would have heard it this morning, or earlier, but unfortunately the mechanics are down. You can find them at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on Instagram. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for
you.
loving and supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over these years to give us these great stories to share with you, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you.
Good night.
Good night.